Hey, this is Jim with NDI November. One of my favorite things to do as we go through a course of events like this is to talk to our system integrators who are out there in the field using the technology and installing the technology for their clients and customers all over the world. Jesse Miller from Midtown Video is one of our system integrators who has joined us for all 5 years of NDI November. Welcome back to the show, Jesse.
Thanks very much. I need a five timers jacket.
I know, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great idea. We'll have to get those printed. Uh, Jesse, not only have you joined us on NDI November for 5 years, but you're celebrating another anniversary as well. I believe Midtown Video has some huge congratulations in order with 40-year anniversary. Wow, that's awesome.
Thanks very much. Yeah, people give me a funny look when I tell them we're celebrating our 40th anniversary. I'm honored to be second generation leadership here at Midtown.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about Midtown Video. I know you guys are doing a lot in the event, live production, broadcast, sports, schools, all the stuff that we've talked about throughout these shows. But where has Midtown started 40 years ago, and kind of where are you guys going, and what are you doing today?
Great question. In 1984, we opened as a broadcast rental house. So people that were, doing electronic news gathering or commercial production in Miami, Florida, they would rent cameras and switchers from Midtown. And it's a lot has changed in 40 years.
I guess so, yeah.
Now we're 100% focused on AV integration. So whether it's conference systems or technology for retail or, stadium sound systems and television production studios, this is where we excel.
That's awesome. One of the things that I thought would be fun today, since we've had you on the show and you're joining us for the fifth straight year, is to talk about some of the top 5 reasons that Midtown Video, and you specifically, like NDI, recommend NDI to your clients, and how you're using it throughout some of these installs.
We're going to NDI November is every month.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But we do like to put the spotlight on it, and that's one of the goals for our event, obviously. And it all starts with the cameras as the video sources. Getting those cameras on an NDI network adds a ton of flexibility throughout some of the production environments you work in, right?
So just to be able to run a single cable to the camera is extremely useful. And putting cameras in kind of hard to reach places, powering up over Ethernet, and of course, getting nice high bandwidth signals routable on the network. That's really useful. All of the manufacturers bought in, whether it was quickly right away or at least now they're starting to recognize that even if you've got 12G SDI, you still need the NDI feed because it really opens up production to the production teams, to the in-house AV teams. A lot of people are relying on NDI.
Absolutely. And I think one of the trends, or one of the biggest technology improvements we've seen over the past 5 years, is how that camera signal is capable of more. Now with NDI version 6 and NDI HX3, you're getting higher quality bandwidth and a more efficient send through that AV over IP, allowing you to do more at, quite honestly, more of a broadcast level, right?
Totally. I mean, the bandwidth efficiency is allowing people to put more and more devices on the network, and, the network switch manufacturers recognizing the importance of, creating nice multicast systems, easy for the integrators to implement. It's making an explosion, really, of NDI-enabled devices and AV over IP devices in general on the network.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue into the second tip that we have of the top 5. And that is the ability to bring in additional video sources, not just the cameras that we talk about all the time, but NDI really allows you to take any device that's installed on that network, right?
We're putting, obviously, computer desktops on the network as sources. We're pushing out to teleprompters, graphics. There's entire computer graphics systems made that are just NDI systems, no SDI connections to the switcher anymore. It made me, I came across an old photo from a production we did in 2012 It was in a TriCaster 860 pre-NDI. It was called IVGA back then, when we brought a Twitter feed into this global stream about, water and water challenges that different geographic regions were experiencing and how precious water is. Point being, 12 years ago, we were using like a VGA to SDI converter so that we could pull the Twitter feed in as a lower third. And now, I mean, you could just run the application desktop on a TC2 or just use like a fancy NDI enabled graphics system from the New Blue guys or whatever to implement your Twitter feeds. Like how far we have come.
Yep.
We've got the data, to show it. It's very cool.
No, absolutely. And I saw that Midtown Video is also a Zoom certified partner. So I'm sure you're running into a ton of applications in the video conferencing and corporate AV space where you're using NDI to help in some of those workflows too, right?
For sure. The bigger shops are using an entire production system, like NDI cameras, TriCaster, and really mixing a town hall meeting and then just little USB capture device into a laptop to run it out on Zoom, unless they're in a TC2 that's running Zoom on the TriCaster, of course. But the point being, even though the production is getting more and more elaborate, you still want that feel into your software codec meetings, your Zoom meetings, your Teams meetings. Interestingly and famously, Teams is NDI compatible. So when you're hosting a Teams meeting, you can already pull out each individual participant as their own NDI feed, which opens up a lot of possibilities for the people that are operating on NDI switchers.
You mean exactly like we're doing in our Broadfield studio today. We have Jesse joining us over Teams, and it is an NDI feed going right back to our TriCaster system.
Nice.
So, yeah, that's exactly how we're doing it. Jesse, you talked about the TriCaster system. You talked about how long Midtown Video has been implementing and working with the TriCaster. And that really is a huge part of these NDI production systems that we're talking about. The production capabilities, not just with VizRT, but with other products and bringing in all of these sources together, really have expanded with all of these AV over IP devices, right?
Yeah, the NDI ecosystem, it's really cool. From a audio standpoint, you'd throw a stage box on the stage, maybe run a single cat line back to where the audio mixer is. The same analogy holds now with NDI. You can throw individual channel encoders and decoders, or like a rack mounted, 8, I don't want to say input, 8 IO device that can convert SDIs to NDIs backwards and forwards. Put that anywhere on your network and, put your rack mounted TriCaster system somewhere else, and things start to get multiply very quickly. Yeah.
Absolutely. And now with the NDI technology, that production system can also become a distribution source, not just to the outside streaming world, but in other applications as well, right?
We call it campus-wide video. If you get your multicast configuration right in your network switches, the NDI system can be your digital signage, can be your video wall processor. We're sending NDI signals, campus-wide at houses of worship where they've got a bunch of classrooms, or schools, or corporate campuses where they've ditched the traditional digital signage approach and are just doing it all over the NDI network, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I see in the value of working with an integrator like Midtown Video is you guys come in with your expertise and can kind of set up a small individual office that expands to multiple offices that then expands to a campus. So now you can set up kind of a small pilot type area and then show how that can be implemented across a house of worship, a university, a corporate AV space, and really grow as the needs grow, right?
This probably brings you into your next slide, but it's not even limited by one campus, right?
Yep.
We can go fully remote. There you go.
Yeah.
So remote production, even if it's in the campus, right? You open up a laptop or really any computer, you run that NDI monitor app with KVM enabled, and you can control the TriCaster from anywhere. and using things like NDI Bridge or just a private expansion of one campus network and another campus network over the wide area network, right? Now you're uniting two complete sets of NDI hardware, and you can do remote production where cameras and production crew are in one venue, and the back of house guys, technical director and producers are in another venue, and it sort of eliminates that distance between, thanks to the network. There are certain compromises you got to make, right?
Sure.
Things aren't going to be quite as real time. You don't want to do it for image magnification, for example, in the same room, and still the ability to operate your production team in one place and your production crew at the venue is otherwise much harder to accomplish without using NDI.
Absolutely. And look, I'll tell you, I think that's where your expertise with some of these installs really comes into play, is that you can speak honestly to where some of the limitations are, to where some of the benefits are, and then to create the workflow that just makes the most sense. Any limitation that you have in any technology is not insurmountable. It just has to be something that you're aware of. And then you find the right technology that addresses that issue and allows you to create the best production possible.
You nailed it, Jim.
Perfect.
You're hired.
Awesome. And then the last tip that I wanted to talk about is really kind of an open-ended one, because one of the things that we see with an NDI production and NDI infrastructure is that putting your video sources like the cameras and other sources we talked about, and even the production systems onto a network, opens the door for more AV over IP protocols and more capabilities campus-wide, like you talked about. What are some of those capabilities that you see once you start setting up these robust network infrastructures?
Well, it's a much easier discussion to have with a client that's using Dante that you want to introduce to NDI, and another people that are using either Crestron's NVX or MXNet from AV Pro, like people that are using the network switches to distribute their video content, get it right away when you start talking about putting a camera on the network with NDI. They sort of play in different worlds, the Dante and the NDI, but the idea of putting things, getting out of like separate, let's just call them cable paths, right? Putting everything onto the network makes things a lot easier for organizations to adopt new technologies. Whether it's ST2110 or whether it's just going Dante, for your audio distribution, it creates these new flexibilities. We were honored recently with an award from Commercial Integrator for this retail project where these toy stores have rotating thematic experiences. They partnered up with Disney. They partnered up with Bluey. They've got the Little Mermaid going. They've got Trolls going in experiential toy stores on 14 locations throughout the country. And every 6 months or so, the theme rotates. And originally, we did it all with 70-volt speakers, and the floor map of these experiences would have to change. So that meant like running new home runs for the 70-volt speaker lines back to the rack and moving the speakers around. And Josh Wright, who's the brilliant network and technology representative for camps, like there's got to be a better way. Like what if we ran a network grid in the ceiling? Could we cut down on the time? And that really got us thinking. Like, yeah, there are Dante enabled speakers. So if you put a network jack at 60 locations in the ceiling, it would be so simple just to grab a speaker, move it from one network jack to the next, and then dynamically reassign the speaker zones, and boom, their thematic rotations went from, like 3 days of audiovisual work down to like half a day. So moving your technology from the old separate systems, it's already digital, it's not necessarily analog, right? But moving your digital systems to the network creates the kind of flexibility that like the cutting edge organizations need right now to keep up, to continue to serve their customers.
Absolutely. And your example with that network grid can now be used for video sources if a specific project required that. So
you nailed it. When their experiences have a monitor, right, as a backdrop or something like this, we can throw an NDI encoder somewhere on the network, pop a decoder anywhere, and we've got video over the network. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Absolutely. And that's why, like, even if you look at the background that we're using for our presentation today, when you see all of these different routings and connections and all the capability that AV over IP gives you, it's one of the reasons why we get excited talking about NDI technology, talking about Dante Audio, talking about how these fit in to legacy environments where you can take an SDI video source, encode it to NDI, and incorporate it into your network. You can take an audio source, configure your Netgear switch to say that that input connection is Dante Audio and that input connection is NDI HX3, and it will all play together on that same production environment, giving you that flexibility like Jesse talked about in changing the workflow and what you're trying to do in this retail space from one month to the next or as they need to, right? Awesome. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us today and for celebrating another year of NDI November and a 40th anniversary at Midtown Video. That is quite an accomplishment, man. Congratulations to you and the entire team there.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Very, very kind. Thank you.
Tune in all week long and all month long, NDINovember.com. Check out our full schedule. One registration gives you access to all of these great shows and a chance of winning some of our great prizes. Sign up today at NDINovember.com and tune in all month long. Until next time, thanks for joining us.